The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky canyon as Samuel Crawford checked his horse's shoes one last time. He had been riding the frontier trails for 3 years now, carrying mail between the scattered settlements of Arizona Territory. The job was dangerous, but it paid well enough to keep him in beans and coffee. Samuel was a quiet man in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin and careful eyes that missed nothing. He had learned long ago that staying alive in Apache country meant paying attention to every sound, every movement, every change in the wind. The territorial conflicts had made these lands deadly for travelers, but Samuel had always managed to avoid trouble by keeping his wits about him. Today felt different, though. His horse, a steady mare named Rosie, kept her ears pricked forward and showed signs of nervousness that Samuel had learned to trust. Something was wrong up ahead, but he couldn't turn back now. The mail pouch contained important letters for Fort Verde, and people were counting on him. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, Samuel heard what Rosie had detected first. Gunshots echoed off the rock walls, followed by angry shouts in English. He pulled his horse to a stop behind a large boulder and quietly dismounted, pulling his rifle from its scabbard. Creeping forward on foot, Samuel peered around the rock and saw a scene that made his blood run cold. 3 rough-looking men had cornered a young Apache woman against the canyon wall. She was maybe 20 years old with long black hair and traditional clothing, and she was clearly in serious trouble. "Come on, girl," one of the men was saying. He was a big fellow with a scraggly beard and a cruel smile. "We ain't gonna hurt you much. Just want to have some fun before we take you to town for the bounty." The woman had a small knife in her hand, but she was outnumbered and had nowhere to run. The canyon walls were too steep to climb, and the 3 men blocked her only escape route. Samuel could see the determination in her dark eyes, but also the fear she was trying hard to hide. Samuel felt his jaw tighten with anger. He had seen enough violence and cruelty in his time to know exactly what these men had in mind. The bounty hunters who stalked Apache people were often the worst kind of men, caring nothing for human decency or the laws that were supposed to protect everyone. He had 2 choices. He could stay hidden and let events play out, keeping himself safe. Or he could intervene and likely end up in a gunfight with 3 armed men. Samuel looked at the woman again, saw her grip tighten on her small blade, and made his decision. "That's far enough," Samuel called out, stepping into view with his rifle raised. "Leave the girl alone and ride out." The 3 men spun around in surprise. The big one with the beard laughed when he saw Samuel standing alone. "Well, looky here," the man said. "Got ourselves a hero. You best mind your own business, stranger, unless you want to end up feeding the buzzards." "I'm making it my business," Samuel replied calmly. "Now back away from her." The second man, thin and nervous-looking, shifted his gun toward Samuel. "3 against 1 ain't good odds for you, mister. Just walk away and pretend you didn't see nothing." Samuel kept his rifle steady. He had been in enough tight spots to know that confidence could sometimes win a fight before it started. "Maybe not," he said, "but I guarantee at least one of you won't ride out of here. Question is, which one wants to be first?" The 3 men exchanged glances. They had expected easy prey, not a determined man with a steady gun and clear aim. The big one was clearly the leader, but Samuel could see doubt creeping into his eyes. "You're bluffing," the 3rd man said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Only one way to find out," Samuel replied. He shifted his rifle slightly toward the big man. "Your move." The tension stretched like a tight wire. Samuel could feel sweat on his palms despite the cool morning air. The Apache woman watched silently, her knife still ready, her eyes moving between Samuel and her tormentors. Then the big man made his decision. Instead of drawing his gun, he slowly raised his hands. "Ain't worth it," he said to his companions. "Plenty more where she came from." "Boss?" the nervous one asked. "I said it ain't worth it." the leader snapped. "Let's go!" Samuel kept his rifle trained on them as they backed toward their horses. "Smart choice," he said. "Keep riding and don't look back." The three men mounted up and rode away, but Samuel noticed the leader's angry glare. These weren't the type to forget a humiliation. They would likely cause trouble again if they got the chance. When the sound of hoofbeats faded, Samuel lowered his rifle and turned to the Apache woman. She was still pressed against the canyon wall, but her knife had disappeared somewhere into her clothing. "Are you hurt?" he asked, keeping his distance to show he meant no harm. She studied him for a long moment before responding in accented but clear English. "I am not hurt. You risked your life for me." "Why?" Samuel shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing to do. Those men had no business treating you that way." The woman stepped away from the rock wall, moving with a natural grace that reminded Samuel of a deer in the forest. She was beautiful, he realized, with intelligent eyes and strong features that spoke of courage and dignity. "I am Ayana," she said, "daughter of Nalnish of the Chiricahua." Samuel touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Samuel Crawford. I carry mail between the settlements." Ayana nodded slowly. "Samuel Crawford. You are not like other white men I have known. I try to judge people by their actions, not the color of their skin," Samuel replied. Something changed in Ayana's expression. She stepped closer, studying his face with an intensity that made Samuel uncomfortable. Then she spoke words that would change his life forever. "You have saved my life and my honor," she said formally. "By the laws of my people, this creates a debt that cannot be repaid with words or gifts. You have shown courage and goodness when you could have stayed safe. Therefore, I declare myself your wife, Samuel Crawford. I will follow you and serve you and protect you as long as we both live." Samuel's jaw dropped. "Wait, what? Ma'am, I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't think—" "It is done," Ayana said firmly. "I have spoken the words before the spirits of this place. We are bound now." "Now hold on," Samuel said, raising his hands. "I didn't save you to get a wife. I just couldn't stand by and watch those men hurt you. You don't owe me anything." Ayana tilted her head, looking puzzled. "You do not understand. This is not about debt. This is about honor and the proper way of things. You have proven yourself worthy. I choose you." Samuel felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. He had heard stories about Apache customs, but he had never expected to find himself in the middle of one. "Listen, Ayana, I'm sure you're a fine woman, but we barely know each other. Marriage is supposed to be about love and choice, and—" "Love grows from respect," Ayana interrupted. "And I have already chosen. Have you no respect for our ways?" Samuel rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. "It's not about respect. It's about the fact that we come from different worlds. Your people and mine have been fighting for years. There's hatred and fear on both sides. If you come with me, it'll cause nothing but trouble for both of us." "Are you afraid?" Ayana asked, and there was something like disappointment in her voice. "I'm practical," Samuel replied. "The settlements I travel to aren't exactly welcoming to Apache people. And I imagine your family wouldn't be too happy about you running off with a white man either." Ayana's expression darkened. "My family is dead," she said quietly. "Killed by soldiers 3 moons ago. That is why I was alone when those men found me. That is why I have no one left to speak for me but myself." Samuel felt a stab of sympathy. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know." "Now you do," Ayana replied. "I have nothing left of my old life, but you have given me a chance for a new one. Will you deny me that?" Samuel looked at this young woman who had just declared herself his wife and tried to figure out what to do. His practical side said to politely decline and send her on her way. but something in her eyes stopped him. She had lost everything and was trying to build something new from the ashes. How could he destroy that hope? "Where were you going when those men found you?" he asked. "Nowhere," Ayanna admitted. "I have been wandering since my family died, trying to decide whether to live or die. When you saved me, the spirits showed me the answer." "And if I take you with me?" Samuel asked. "Then we face whatever comes together," Ayanna said simply, "as husband and wife should." Samuel looked at his horse, then at the canyon around them, then back at Ayanna. Nothing about this situation made sense, but he couldn't bring himself to abandon her either. "You realize that most people in the territories won't understand this," he said finally. "They'll see you as the enemy and me as a traitor." "Do you care what they think?" Ayanna asked. Samuel considered the question seriously. He had always been his own man, making his own choices without worrying much about other people's opinions. But this was different. This could get them both killed. "Some opinions matter when they come with guns," he said. Ayanna smiled for the first time since he had met her. "Then we will have to be smarter and stronger than they are." Samuel found himself smiling back despite his confusion. There was something about this woman that he found compelling. Her strength, her directness, her refusal to be defeated by circumstances that would have broken most people. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" he asked. "Completely serious," Ayanna confirmed. Samuel thought about his lonely life on the frontier trails. He had never really considered marriage, partly because he couldn't imagine asking a woman to share his dangerous, uncertain existence. But here was a woman who understood danger and uncertainty better than most men. "If we do this," he said slowly, "it has to be as equals, partners. I won't have a wife who serves me. I want someone who stands with me. That is what I offer," Ayanna said. Samuel extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Ayanna took it. Her grip was firm and calloused from hard work. "Then I guess we better figure out how to make this work," Samuel said. "We will," Ayanna replied with quiet confidence. Samuel helped her mount behind him on Rosie, and they rode out of the canyon together. Neither of them spoke much as they traveled, both lost in thought about what they had just committed to. As they crested a hill overlooking the next valley, Samuel pulled up to let Rosie rest. The settlement of Cedar Creek lay spread out below them, a collection of wooden buildings and tents clustered around a stream. "That's where we're headed," Samuel told Ayanna. "It's not much, but the people there are generally decent. The postmaster, Frank Morrison, is a fair man. If anyone will give us a chance, it'll be him." Ayanna studied the settlement carefully. "And if they don't give us a chance? Then we'll move on until we find people who will," Samuel said. "You would do that? Give up your work, your life here?" Samuel turned in the saddle to look at her. "I gave you my word. That means something to me." Ayanna nodded. "And I gave you mine. That means something to me as well." As they rode down toward Cedar Creek, Samuel wondered what he had gotten himself into. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone on the frontier trails. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with someone who understood the true meaning of courage and commitment. The sun was climbing higher now, burning off the morning chill. Behind them, the canyon where they had met grew smaller and more distant. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and quite possibly the greatest adventure of Samuel's life. He had set out that morning as a simple mail carrier. Now he was returning as a married man to a woman he barely knew but already respected. The frontier had a way of changing a man's life in the blink of an eye, but Samuel had never imagined it would happen quite like this. Ayanna's arms tightened around his waist as they approached the first buildings of Cedar Creek. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. The first person to notice them riding into Cedar Creek was old Pete Hawkins, who was sweeping the front porch of his general store. Pete's broom stopped mid-sweep when he saw Samuel approach with an Apache woman riding behind him. The old man's mouth fell open, and he hurried inside his store, leaving the door to slam shut behind him. Samuel felt Ayanna's grip tighten around his waist. "They fear me," she said quietly. "They fear what they don't understand," Samuel replied. "Give them time." But time seemed to be in short supply. As they rode down the main street toward the post office, heads appeared in windows and doorways. Conversations stopped. Children were quickly pulled inside. By the time they reached Frank Morrison's building, a small crowd had gathered at a safe distance, whispering among themselves. Samuel dismounted and helped Ayanna down from Rosie. He could feel dozens of eyes watching their every movement. The weight of their stares was almost physical. "Wait here," he told Ayanna softly. "Let me talk to Frank first." Ayanna straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "We face this together. That is what partners do." Samuel nodded, impressed once again by her courage. Together they walked up the wooden steps to the post office. The bell above the door chimed as they entered. Frank Morrison was a thick-set man with graying hair and kind eyes. He had been postmaster in Cedar Creek for 15 years and had seen his share of strange sights, but his eyebrows rose when Samuel walked in with Ayanna beside him. "Morning, Sam," Frank said carefully. "Got your mail sorted and ready." He glanced at Ayanna, then back at Samuel. "Everything all right out there? You look like you've had some excitement." "You could say that," Samuel replied. He took a deep breath. "Frank, I'd like you to meet my wife, Ayanna. Ayanna, this is Frank Morrison, the best postmaster in Arizona Territory." Frank's coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Coffee splashed across his boots, but he didn't seem to notice. "You're what now?" "My wife," Samuel repeated. "We were married this morning according to Apache tradition." Frank stared at them both for a long moment. Outside, the crowd of townspeople was growing larger. Samuel could hear their murmurs through the thin walls. "Sam," Frank said slowly, "you know I've got nothing against you personally, but bringing an Apache woman into town as your wife, that's going to cause problems." "What kind of problems?" Samuel asked, though he suspected he already knew. Before Frank could answer, the door burst open. Mayor William Hastings stormed in, his round face red with anger. Behind him came Sheriff Tom Bradley and 3 other town council members. "Crawford," the mayor snapped, "what's the meaning of this? People are saying you've brought an Apache spy into our town." "She's not a spy," Samuel said calmly. "She's my wife." "Your wife?" Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. "Sam, you've lost your mind. Apache have been raiding settlements all across the territory. Just last month, they hit the Murphy Ranch and killed 2 people. Ayanna spoke for the first time since entering the building. "I have killed no one. I raid no settlements. I am alone in the world except for this man who saved my life." Mayor Hastings pointed an accusing finger at her. "Don't believe a word she says. They're all liars and killers. Sheriff, arrest her." "On what charge?" Samuel stepped protectively in front of Ayanna. "Trespassing," the mayor said. "Disturbing the peace. Being Apache in a white settlement." "That's not a crime," Samuel replied. "It is in my town," Mayor Hastings shot back. Frank Morrison cleared his throat. "Now hold on, everybody. Let's think about this reasonably. Sam's been carrying our mail faithfully for 3 years. If he says this woman is his wife, then maybe we ought to listen to what they have to say." "Listen to what?" Councilman Peters demanded. "He's clearly been bewitched by some Apache magic. We should run them both out of town before they bring a war party down on us." Samuel felt his temper rising. The only magic here is the kind that makes decent people turn cruel when they're afraid. "Afraid?" Sheriff Bradley laughed harshly. "Damn right we're afraid. Apache have been murdering settlers for years. Now you want us to welcome one into our homes? I want you to judge her by her actions, not her blood, Samuel said. Ayanna placed a gentle hand on Samuel's arm. Perhaps we should go, she said quietly. I do not wish to bring trouble to these people. No, Samuel said firmly. We have as much right to be here as anyone. Mayor Hastings stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. You've got 1 hour to get her out of my town, Crawford. After that, we'll handle this our own way. What's that supposed to mean? Samuel demanded. Sheriff Bradley's hand moved to his gun again. It means we'll do whatever it takes to protect our people. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Samuel could see that several of the men were armed and ready to use their weapons. This was spiraling toward violence fast. Then Ayanna surprised everyone by stepping forward. May I speak? Ayanna, you don't have to, Samuel began. Yes, I do, she said quietly. She looked directly at Mayor Hastings. You fear me because you believe I am your enemy. You believe I am your enemy because other Apache have fought you. This I understand. Your people and mine have been at war for many years. Exactly, the mayor said. So you understand why? I understand that war makes people forget that we are all human, Ayanna continued. But I also understand something else. Samuel Crawford could have ridden past when he saw me in danger. He could have saved his own life and let me die. Instead, he risked everything to help someone he had never met. If you judge him badly for this, what does that say about you? Several of the men looked uncomfortable. Frank Morrison was nodding slowly. Furthermore, Ayanna said, you speak of protecting your people. I too have people to protect. I have only one person now, but I will die before I let harm come to him. Samuel Crawford is my family now. I will defend him as fiercely as you defend your town. Pretty words, Councilman Peters said. But how do we know you won't lead a war party here in the middle of the night? Ayanna's eyes flashed with anger. Because I am not a liar or a killer, no matter what you choose to believe. And because the war parties you fear have already taken everything from me. My parents, my brothers, my village, all dead in the fighting between our peoples. I have no one left to lead against you. The room fell silent. Even Mayor Hastings seemed taken aback by the raw pain in her voice. Frank Morrison spoke up. How did they die? Ayanna was quiet for a moment. Soldiers came to our camp under a flag of peace. They said they wanted to talk. When our men came out to meet them, the soldiers opened fire. My father died trying to protect women and children who were running for the hills. Sheriff Bradley frowned. What unit? I do not know your military words, Ayanna replied. But their leader was a man with yellow hair and a scar across his face. The sheriff and mayor exchanged glances. Sounds like Captain Morrison's cavalry, Bradley said quietly. We heard rumors about that massacre, but the army covered it up. So you see, Ayanna continued, I have as much reason to hate as any of you. But hatred is a poison that kills the one who drinks it. I choose to live instead. Mayor Hastings shifted uncomfortably. Even if everything you say is true, the fact remains that your presence here endangers our town. Other Apache might see you as a traitor and attack us to get to you. Or, Samuel said, they might see that we can find a way to live together in peace. That's a hell of a gamble with innocent lives, Councilman Peters said. Everything worth doing is a gamble, Frank Morrison said unexpectedly. Everyone turned to look at the postmaster. When my Mary was dying of fever 10 years ago, Doc Henley wanted to try a new treatment, said it might kill her or it might save her. I had to decide whether to take the risk or watch her die slowly. I chose to take the risk. Mary's still alive today because of it. This ain't the same thing, Frank, Sheriff Bradley said. Isn't it? Frank replied. Sometimes you have to take a risk to find something better. Samuel saw an opportunity. Give us a chance, he said. 1 month. Let us prove that Ayanna can live here in peace. If there's any trouble, any at all, we'll leave quietly. Mayor Hastings shook his head. Too dangerous. What if we posted a bond? Samuel offered. Say $100. If anything happens, you keep the money. I don't want your money, Crawford. I want you both gone. Ayanna stepped forward again. What would it take to change your mind? The mayor studied her suspiciously. Nothing. There's nothing you could do to make me trust an Apache. Then let me prove my worth through actions, Ayanna said. You have problems in this town, yes? Things that need doing? Let me help. Like what? Frank Morrison asked, genuinely curious. Ayanna looked around the room, taking in details the men had stopped noticing long ago. Your roof leaks, she said to Frank. I can see water stains on the ceiling, and the wood on these walls is dry, too dry. It will burn easily if fire starts. Frank nodded slowly. Been meaning to fix that roof for months. I can fix it, Ayanna said, and I can show you how to treat the wood to make it safer. You know how to do that kind of work? Sheriff Bradley asked skeptically. Apache women learn many skills, Ayanna replied. We must be able to build, repair, heal, and protect. I can do all of these things. Samuel watched the faces of the men around him. He could see doubt warring with curiosity. Ayanna was handling this better than he had hoped. What about the children? Councilman Peters asked. My wife's scared to let our kids play outside with an Apache in town. Children adapt quickly, Ayanna said. If their parents show them there is nothing to fear, they will learn not to fear. And if you're wrong, Mayor Hastings demanded, if your presence here gets someone killed, then I will answer for it, Ayanna said simply. But if I am right, perhaps we can build something better than fear and hatred. Frank Morrison leaned against his counter. Sam, you're putting us in a difficult position. But I've known you for 3 years, and you've never steered me wrong before. If you believe in her, maybe we ought to at least consider it. Frank, Sheriff Bradley warned, think about what you're saying. I am thinking, Frank replied. I'm thinking about my grandson Billy, who's growing up believing that Apache are monsters instead of people. I'm thinking about how we're teaching our children to hate before they even know why. Maybe it's time to try something different. Mayor Hastings threw his hands up in frustration. You're all crazy. This will end badly. Mark my words. But Samuel could see that the mood in the room was shifting. These were decent people at heart, scared but not evil. Given a chance to choose hope over fear, some of them were willing to try. 1 month, Sheriff Bradley said finally. But if there's any trouble at all, even a broken window, you're both gone, and we'll have men watching you the whole time. Samuel looked at Ayanna, who nodded. Fair enough, he said. Mayor Hastings shook his head in disgust. On your heads be it. When this goes wrong, don't come crying to me. He stormed out of the post office, slamming the door behind him. The other council members followed, muttering among themselves. Only Frank Morrison and Sheriff Bradley remained. Where will you stay? Frank asked. Samuel hadn't thought that far ahead. Is the boarding house still taking guests? Frank winced. Mrs. Patterson won't rent to you now, not with Ayanna. Then we'll camp outside of town, Samuel said. No need for that, Frank said. Mary and I have a small cabin behind our house. Been using it for storage, but it's got a good roof and a working stove. You can rent it for a fair price. Sheriff Bradley looked surprised. Frank, you sure about this? No, Frank admitted, but I'm sure about Sam. And if she's good enough for him, she deserves a chance to prove herself. Samuel felt a wave of gratitude. Thank you, Frank. That means more than you know. Just don't make me regret it, Frank said with a slight smile. As they left the post office, Samuel could see that the crowd outside had grown even larger. Dozens of people lined the street, watching their every move. Some faces showed curiosity, others fear or anger. Children peered out from behind their mothers' skirts. This is going to be harder than I thought, Samuel murmured to Ayanna as they walked toward their horses. All good things are hard, she replied. If they were easy, they would not be worth doing. Samuel smiled, despite the tension. Where did you learn to talk to angry white men like that? My father was a chief, Ayanna said. He taught me that words can be more powerful than weapons if you know how to use them. Your father was a wise man. Yes, he was. Ayanna's voice grew sad. He would have liked you, I think. He always said that a man's worth is measured by his willingness to do what is right, even when it is difficult. They mounted Rosie and rode toward Frank Morrison's house, the crowd parting before them like water. Samuel could feel the weight of their stares, but he kept his head high. Beside him, Ayanna sat straight and proud, showing no sign of fear despite the hostile reception. As they reached the small cabin behind the Morrison house, Samuel realized that the real test was just beginning. They had won the right to stay for 1 month, but now they had to prove that people from different worlds could truly build a life together. The frontier had taught Samuel many lessons about survival, but this was something entirely new. He was about to learn that the most dangerous territory wasn't the wild country between settlements. It was the uncharted land between two hearts learning to trust each other. The small cabin behind the Morrison house was simple, but clean. It had one room with a stone fireplace, a small table, and a single bed. Samuel stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of the awkward situation they had created for themselves. I'll sleep on the floor, he said quickly. You take the bed. Ayanna looked at him with amusement. We are married, Samuel Crawford. In the eyes of my people, and now in the eyes of yours. But we barely know each other, Samuel protested. It wouldn't be right. Then we will learn, Ayanna said simply. But we will do it as husband and wife, not as strangers sharing a cabin. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Samuel continued his mail runs to nearby settlements, while Ayanna worked on improving their living situation and proving her worth to the townspeople. True to her word, she fixed the leaking roof on Frank Morrison's post office using a mixture of pine tar and clay that she said would last for years. The work attracted attention. Women began gathering across the street to watch the Apache woman work with skill and efficiency that impressed even the skeptics. When Mrs. Patterson's chicken coop was damaged in a windstorm, she swallowed her pride and asked Ayanna for help. Within 2 days, the coop was not only repaired, but improved with better ventilation and stronger walls. Never seen anybody work with wood like that, old Pete Hawkins admitted to Samuel. She's got a real talent. But not everyone was warming to Ayanna's presence. Mayor Hastings continued to voice his opposition at every opportunity, and a small group of men led by Councilman Peters made no secret of their desire to see her gone. The tension in town was like a dry forest, waiting for a spark. That spark came on a Thursday morning in the form of Jake Morrison, Frank's hot-headed nephew who worked as a ranch hand outside of town. Jake came riding hard into Cedar Creek, his horse lathered with sweat and his eyes wild with anger. "Uncle Frank!" he shouted, sliding off his horse in front of the post office. "They got cattle thieves working the Morrison spread. Took near 100 head last night." Samuel was just arriving with mail from Fort Verde when he heard the commotion. He dismounted and approached Jake, who was surrounded by concerned townspeople. "You see who took them?" Sheriff Bradley asked. "Tracks head north toward the Badlands," Jake replied. "But I know who it was. Apache raiders. Had to be." The crowd turned as one to stare at Ayanna, who had been helping Mary Morrison hang laundry behind the post office. Samuel felt his blood run cold as he saw the suspicion and anger building in the faces around him. "You got proof it was Apache?" Samuel asked Jake. "Who else would steal cattle and head for the Badlands?" Jake shot back. "And ain't it convenient that this happens right after she shows up in town?" He pointed an accusing finger at Ayanna. That's ridiculous, Samuel said. Ayana's been here working all week. Everyone's seen her. But Mayor Hastings was already pushing through the crowd. I told you this would happen, he said loudly. She's been signaling her people, telling them where to strike. I have done no such thing, Ayana said calmly, but Samuel could see the hurt in her eyes. Councilman Peters stepped forward. Time's up, Crawford. Get her out of here before we do it ourselves. Now wait just a minute, Frank Morrison said, but his voice was shaking. His own nephew's cattle had been stolen, and the pressure to choose sides was enormous. Sheriff Bradley looked torn. Sam, maybe it would be best if you both moved on, for everyone's sake. Samuel felt the situation slipping away from him. The townspeople who had been warming to Ayana were now looking at her with fresh suspicion. Fear was winning over reason. Then Ayana surprised everyone again. I will track them, she said. What? Samuel asked. The cattle thieves, Ayana explained. I will track them and prove that I had nothing to do with this theft. Jake Morrison laughed harshly. Right. Send the fox to track the chickens. You afraid of what I might find? Ayana asked quietly. Something in her tone made Jake's laughter die. What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe you should ask yourself why someone would steal cattle and drive them toward the Badlands, Ayana replied. The Badlands have no grass, no water. Cattle would die there in days. But they are a good place to hide stolen animals temporarily before moving them somewhere else. Sheriff Bradley frowned. What are you getting at? I am getting at the fact that Apache raiders would not drive cattle toward the Badlands, Ayana said. We would take them to places where they could graze and water. These thieves either do not know the country, or they are not Apache. Then who? Jake demanded. Let me track them and find out, Ayana said. Absolutely not, Mayor Hastings declared. We're not sending her off to warn her accomplices. Then I'll go with her, Samuel said. Sheriff Bradley shook his head. Too dangerous. If it is Apache raiders, they'll kill you both. And if it's not Apache? Ayana asked. What if it's white men trying to blame my people for their crimes? The crowd fell silent. It was a possibility none of them had considered. Frank Morrison spoke up. What would you need? A good horse, supplies for 3 days, and someone who can read sign, Ayana said. Samuel has good eyes and a steady hand. We can find the truth. This is madness, Councilman Peters protested. Is it? Frank asked. Jake, you said the trail heads north? That's right, Uncle Frank. Well, that doesn't make sense for Apache raiders, Frank said slowly. They'd head south toward Mexico or east toward their traditional territories. North takes you deeper into settled country. Jake looked uncomfortable. Maybe they were confused. Apache don't get confused about directions, Ayana said. We learn the land like you learn to read words on paper. Samuel could see doubt creeping into people's faces. Give us 1 day, he said. If we're not back by tomorrow night, assume the worst and do whatever you think is best. Sheriff Bradley thought for a long moment. 1 day, he agreed finally, but you're taking a hell of a risk. Within an hour, Samuel and Ayana were riding north out of Cedar Creek. Samuel carried his rifle and enough supplies for 3 days, while Ayana rode a sturdy bay mare that Frank Morrison had provided. The cattle trail was easy to follow at first, 100 head of beef-leave clear signs. As they rode, Ayana studied the ground with an intensity that amazed Samuel. She could read the story written in dust and broken grass better than he could read a newspaper. 4 men, she said, after examining a clear section of trail. 2 riding ahead, 2 behind the herd. The cattle are being driven hard, too hard. They will be exhausted soon. How can you tell all that? Samuel asked. The horses leave different marks, Ayana explained. The depth of hoof prints tells you the weight of the rider. The spacing tells you if they are hurrying or taking their time. The cattle tracks show they are stumbling. which means they are tired. They followed the trail for 3 hours before Ayanna suddenly pulled up her horse. "Something is wrong," she said. "What do you see?" "The cattle tracks split here," Ayanna said, dismounting to examine the ground more closely. "Half the herd continues north. The other half turns east toward the river." Samuel dismounted as well and looked at the confused mass of tracks. He could see that something had happened here, but he couldn't read the details the way Ayanna could. "Why would they split the herd?" he asked. "To hide their true destination," Ayanna said. "The tracks going north are false. They drive half the cattle toward the Badlands to make everyone think they are heading that way. But the real prize goes east toward the river." "Which way do we follow?" "East," Ayanna said without hesitation. "The northern tracks are meant to be found. The eastern tracks are meant to be hidden." They followed the eastern trail, which was much harder to track. The thieves had driven the cattle through rocky ground and stream beds to disguise their passage. But Ayanna's skills proved equal to the challenge. She found broken twigs that showed where cattle had passed, disturbed rocks that revealed hoof prints, and other signs that Samuel would have missed completely. As the sun reached its peak, they crested a hill overlooking the river valley. Below them, in a hidden canyon, they could see the stolen cattle grazing peacefully near a small stream. Watching over them were 4 men on horseback. Samuel pulled out his spyglass and studied the rustlers. What he saw made his blood run cold. "I know those men," he said grimly. "Who are they?" Ayanna asked. "The same 3 who had you cornered in the canyon," Samuel replied. "Plus 1 more. That big fellow with the beard is their leader." "The bounty hunters," Ayanna said. "They steal cattle and let Apache take the blame." "Smart plan," Samuel admitted. "Everyone expects Apache to steal cattle. Nobody looks too hard for white rustlers." "What do we do?" Samuel considered their options. 4 armed men against 2 would not be good odds, especially since the rustlers held the high ground in the canyon. But they had to do something. If these cattle weren't recovered, Ayanna would be blamed for their loss. "We need proof," he said. "Something that shows these men are the real thieves." Ayanna studied the canyon carefully. "There," she said, pointing to a narrow trail that led down the back side of the canyon. "I can get close enough to hear what they say." "Too dangerous," Samuel said. "I am very good at moving quietly," Ayanna replied, "and they will not expect to see me here." "If something goes wrong, then you will need to get back to town and tell them what we found," Ayanna said firmly. "The truth matters more than our safety." Samuel wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her eyes. "Give me your word you'll be careful." "I give you my word," Ayanna said. She handed him the reins of her horse and disappeared into the brush like a ghost. Samuel waited, watching the canyon through his spyglass and fighting the urge to follow her. Minutes stretched like hours as he scanned the rocky slopes for any sign of movement. Then he saw her, just for a moment, a shadow moving between the rocks near the canyon floor. She was getting close to the rustlers' camp. Through his spyglass, Samuel could see the men talking among themselves, but he was too far away to hear what they were saying. He could only hope that Ayanna would learn something useful without being discovered. A gunshot echoed through the canyon. Samuel's heart stopped as he saw one of the rustlers pointing in Ayanna's direction. She had been spotted. "There!" the big man shouted. "By them rocks! It's that Apache girl." Samuel saw Ayanna break cover and run for the canyon wall. Bullets whined off the rocks around her as the rustlers spurred their horses in pursuit. She was fast, but she couldn't outrun mounted men in open ground. Samuel made his decision. He spurred his horse down the hillside toward the canyon, drawing his rifle as he rode. He couldn't reach Ayanna in time, but he could give the rustlers something else to worry about. "Hey!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. "Over here!" The rustlers turned in surprise as Samuel came charging down the slope. He fired his rifle in the air to get their attention, then levered in another round. "It's that mail carrier," one of them yelled. "The one who interfered before." The big man with the beard wheeled his horse around. "Kill them both," he ordered. Bullets began flying in both directions. Samuel reached the canyon floor and dove off his horse, using a boulder for cover. He could see Ayanna doing the same thing about 50 yards away. "You should have minded your own business," the leader shouted at Samuel. "Stealing cattle is everyone's business," Samuel shouted back. "Prove we stole anything." "Those are Morrison cattle," Samuel replied. "I can see the brand from here." For a moment, the shooting stopped. The rustlers realized they had just admitted to being cattle thieves in front of witnesses. "Don't matter," the leader said finally. "Dead men tell no tales." The gunfight resumed with deadly intensity. Samuel was a good shot, but he was outnumbered 4-1. Bullets chipped rocks near his head and whined off the boulder, protecting him. His ammunition was limited, and the rustlers seemed to have plenty. Then Ayanna surprised everyone again. While the men were focused on Samuel, she worked her way around behind them, using the canyon walls for cover. Samuel saw her appear on a ledge above the rustlers' position. She had found some loose rocks. As Samuel watched in amazement, she began rolling them down the slope toward the thieves. The rocks started small avalanches that forced the men to scatter for safety. "What the hell?" one of them yelled as stones bounced off his horse. The distraction gave Samuel the opening he needed. He broke cover and ran to a better position while the rustlers tried to avoid the falling rocks. When the stone slide ended, he had them caught between his rifle and Ayanna's high position. "Give it up!" Samuel shouted. "You're surrounded!" "Like hell we are," the leader replied, but Samuel could hear doubt in his voice. The standoff stretched for several minutes. Then, one of the younger rustlers made a mistake. He tried to creep around Samuel's position and walked right into Ayanna's line of sight. She dropped another small avalanche right on top of him, knocking him from his horse and sending him tumbling down the slope. "Jimmy!" another rustler called out. "I'm all right," Jimmy replied, but he was clearly shaken. "But I lost my gun." That was enough for one of the other men. "Boss, maybe we should cut our losses." "Nobody's cutting nothing," the leader snarled. But Samuel could see that his men were losing their nerve. The fight ended suddenly when Sheriff Bradley's voice echoed through the canyon. "This is the law! You're surrounded! Throw down your weapons!" Samuel looked up to see the sheriff and a posse of 6 men positioned on the canyon rim above them. Apparently his absence had been noticed, and the sheriff had followed their trail. The rustlers looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to run. Slowly, reluctantly, they began laying down their guns. "Smart choice," Sheriff Bradley called down. "Now step away from the weapons and put your hands up." As the posse moved in to arrest the cattle thieves, Samuel made his way over to where Ayanna was climbing down from her rocky perch. "You hurt?" he asked. "No," she replied. "But that was closer than I like. What did you hear before they spotted you?" "Enough," Ayanna said with satisfaction. "They were talking about selling the cattle to a buyer in Tucson. And they mentioned other herds they have stolen over the past year, always blaming Apache for their crimes." Sheriff Bradley approached them, shaking his head in amazement. "How did you two manage to corner 4 armed men?" "Teamwork," Samuel said, looking at Ayanna with new respect. "And good rocks," Ayanna added with a slight smile. As they rode back to Cedar Creek with the recovered cattle and captured rustlers, Samuel reflected on what had happened. Ayanna had proven herself in a way that no words could match. She had risked her life to clear her people's name and protect the town that had grudgingly accepted her. The reception in Cedar Creek was very different from their arrival a week earlier. People lined the streets to cheer their return. Jake Morrison pumped Samuel's hand and apologized to Ayanna for doubting her. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I'm sorry." Even Mayor Hastings seemed subdued as the truth came out. The captured rustlers confessed to stealing cattle throughout the territory and letting Apache take the blame. It had been a profitable scheme until Ayanna's tracking skills exposed them. That evening, as Samuel and Ayanna sat by the fire in their small cabin, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Taking me as your wife?" Samuel thought about everything that had happened since he had first seen her in that canyon. The fear, the uncertainty, the danger, and finally the acceptance they had earned together. "No," he said firmly. "I don't regret it for a moment." "Even though it has brought you trouble?" "The best things in life usually do," Samuel replied. "Besides, we make a good team." Ayanna smiled, and Samuel realized it was the first completely unguarded smile he had seen from her. "Yes," she said, "we do." Outside, the town of Cedar Creek settled into peaceful sleep. For the first time since their arrival, Samuel felt like they truly belonged somewhere. They had proven that two people from different worlds could build something together that was stronger than either could achieve alone. The frontier still held dangers and uncertainties, but Samuel no longer faced them alone. He had a partner who understood the true meaning of courage, loyalty, and love. Whatever adventures lay ahead, they would face them together, as husband and wife, as equals, as friends. The mail would still need carrying, and there would always be people who needed help along the frontier trails. But now there were two of them to answer the call, and that made all the difference in the world.